check.
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 There we
Sweet.
go. Come on.
Well, welcome to the first in-person following up. I'm glad that you're here. I'm glad you're the first one on here. I can, introduce you, my good friend, Ian Faulkner. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so you already said my name, Ian Faulkner. I'm a fairly recent transplant here to Wilmington, North Carolina, by way of Chicago and Indianapolis.
Yeah.
And like so many people here, moved here because I got a remote job in tech.
Yeah. So lean back, get comfortable, Get comfortable here. So what's life been like since, the layoff recently?
Yeah, so joined a Series C startup, so about 7 years old when I joined, and great company, love what they're doing, but it's a staffing software solution and selling mostly to other SaaS orgs.
Yeah.
And so as, SaaS is on either hiring freezes or they're doing reductions, obviously ripple effect caught us. So a couple of rounds of layoffs, third round caught me. So been out for about 2.5 months at this point. And, it's this weird mix of you got a lot of free time. Yeah. Which is really good. It can also be really dangerous.
Yeah, but you also constantly I don't know, you wake up every morning like, okay, I need to apply and I need to it's the same thing with sales, right? Like you have to send out so many resumes and applications and whatnot, right?
Yeah, I mean the job search literally you become the product. And so you're selling literally yourself. And if you don't treat it like that sort of process, I feel like if you jump on LinkedIn, you'll see someone post I've been out of work for 8 months. I've been sitting in applications, and obviously I don't know those people personally. And my heart is always but I also know there's so much work beyond just applying, tweaking your resume. That stuff is good, but I would argue it's not best.
Yeah. I always wonder when I see those posts of hey, I've been out of work for 8 months. I've sent in 500 job applications. I'm like, okay, there's something they're doing wrong. Or yeah, I don't know, because I've also seen posts on LinkedIn. When people start complaining so much and they're like, I deserve a job and stuff like that, I feel like that's such off-putting to employers, right? If I'm hiring and someone's everything's unfair, all this stuff, I'd be like, okay, I don't really want that person in my org, right?
Yeah, it's super tough. And I think especially, through this process, I've networked now a ton with people both who are hiring and also people in this boat.
Yeah.
And you realize, I think there's multiple camps. I met a new friend just this week, and she's super, super qualified. Built out her program at a fairly large org, a name brand. Everyone would know where she worked. And so, and then she got riffed. And so now she's been out for a while. She got something else. It was a startup. They riffed after 2 months.
Yeah.
So it's
because that hurts her resume too, right? It's
right.
Yeah.
And so it's when I hear her story and I connect with her on a call, I'm like, she's so qualified.
Yeah.
Anyone would be lucky to have her. And so haven't seen her make a post like that, but if that's who we're talking about, it's totally different than, to your point.
Yeah.
And it's hard because again, we only know what we see there on LinkedIn.
Yeah. I mean, obviously not with someone like her, but are you seeing a lot of companies, or do you think a lot of companies are going to try to basically reel people back, right? If you were an enterprise software person before, right? Now you might only be able to get a mid-market one or something, right? Is there a lot of that?
I think there's a piece of that. I think it's also, I think companies are really thinking about headcount in terms of where do they want their employees at?
Yeah.
One thing we don't realize when we're remote employees is if you're the only one in their state, that's going to change their state taxes. Yeah. And so even you might see now companies are posting and say must be in the list 6 states. It's not because they really care if time zone, it's because of the tax implications.
I didn't even think of that.
Oh, it's crazy.
That's interesting.
Yeah, you don't think about it until you start talking to them. So I think some of it's going to be, obviously the best salespeople are always going to land on their feet somewhere.
Yeah.
And again, that's where you and I both sit.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be, again, my heart breaks for right now, HR space, recruiters. Mm-hmm. It's what's that look like for them? And obviously companies are going to grow and then they're going to need those people. But until the recruiters get back in seat, how are we going to get back in seat? And it's a mess.
Yeah, it's tough. It's all a ripple effect, right? I spoke to a recruiter last week that only recruits, people in the tech sales space.
Yeah.
But he focuses on people that just got their Series B or C or whatnot. Mm-hmm. And when that stuff isn't happening, it's just a ripple effect of other people are out of work and whatnot.
100%.
Okay, you told me that you're getting like a 40% hit rate on your application. So
Yeah.
what are you doing to do that?
Yeah, I mean, a couple things. One, I've been really picky,
Yeah.
so I'm not spraying out resumes.
Yep.
I'm applying to 3 to 5 jobs a week.
Yep.
Again, because I was selling staffing software, have gotten to talk to a lot of hiring managers and realize like when they're getting 200 applicants for a job, one, they can be really picky, and two, it becomes a lot of luck. And so for me, I'm trying to think like, how do I influence those two pieces?
Yep.
So one, like, I think there are seasons where like apply when you fit 60% of the job requirements. Right now for me in this season, like I'm not going for that job because I know there's other people in front of me. So I'm going to go for the jobs that like I'm at 85, 90% kind of can go through and say yes.
Okay.
And then second of all, you know, if it's a luck factor, I'm always looking like, how do I influence my luck just to get my resume seen?
Yeah.
And so it's on LinkedIn. Can you find the hiring manager right away? Can you see who the recruiter is? Do you have connections at the company so that either before you apply, you get a referral, or, and I would argue like referrals used to be gold. I know like when I was first in the job market 2 years ago, every referral meant I got an interview. Yeah. And that's not the case. I've had multiple referrals and I still get the standard like, no thanks.
Yeah.
So it's not just can I get a referral. I've actually found like, can I get someone who's going to reach out and tap the recruiter on the shoulder and say, hey, Ian just applied. Just take a look.
Yeah.
And I found like if I can find those people, then all of a sudden, like at least I know my resume is going to get reviewed. And then most likely, again, depending on the level of the person that taps them on the shoulder, hopefully I'm going to get the screen call.
Are you still reaching out to like internal recruiters? I feel like there's not that many internal recruiters.
No, I almost never, like I will send a standard, hey, my name's Ian, just applied for your AE role, just wanted to put a name to a face. Best of luck. Recruiters are getting blown up. And so like I'm not seeing any luck if I'm trying to hit a recruiter. I'm either trying to hiring manager, but again, same deal. Like every hiring manager who I have gotten through to tells me, hey, like you are one of 50, 75 in my inbox. Like you're, so it's like, okay, how do I get around them? So a couple of things that have helped is one, like say you're hiring for AEs, so you're an AE manager. If I know someone on like the BDR management team, or I can get connected to them, like that's who I actually want to talk to because again, they're going to support me if I get in seat. So if I can have a conversation, this just happened with the company. Like I talked to their BDR manager. Yeah. We had a good conversation. He then reaches out, taps the recruiter. I'm not even trying to go on his team, but he's going to get me through that process, and he's not getting blown up in the same way that like that hiring manager probably is. Yeah.
Are you getting any like hiring managers that are actually like receptive?
Yeah, for sure. Really? Yeah. I mean, that's the other part of this game is like, how do people like, what's their natural posture either to helping? Yeah. Or what's their bandwidth?
Yeah. Yeah. Cause I feel like, it also probably depends on the job, but I think like with like BDR jobs, like I've seen a lot of hiring managers post that like as soon as the BDR applies, they basically have like an automated LinkedIn message that says like, hey, really liked your role, like nothing personalized in there. It's more of just like just applied, like really hope that we can chat or something like that. Which like as a hiring manager, I could see how that would be so annoying. Right?
Yes, 100%. Yeah. So I kind of hinted at it. If I'm getting to the hiring manager in LinkedIn, I'm doing one of two things. I'm either just saying, hey, my name's Ian, just applied, put a name to a face, best of luck. I'm not going to make an ask. They don't know me. Why would they give me time? Yeah. Or if I apply, like, I've found that voice memos, super powerful. I know for sure. Yeah. I got to a second round with a company, and they told me it was because of my voice memo. So, like, if you don't know how to do that, you can't do it on your computer. It's only going to be on the app. Just, like, drop something in. That's really powerful. And then two is, again, like, find their email. So use Apollo. I've got an Apollo account. Like, so go get their email and drop something in there. Just, you got to stand out. You have to differentiate.
Yeah. Yeah. Those are actually two really good hacks. I saw that the other day with the BDR manager that was like, I get all these automated LinkedIn messages, and he goes, by the way, I got like 100 messages on LinkedIn right after. I got like 2 through email and like 0 through calling, right? Which I know calling's like tough because it's like, a hiring manager isn't necessarily going to want you to like cold call them, right? Like that's awkward. Like if I was, here's like interesting, and like this is on a completely different level, right? But I just helped my friend hire like a VA, right? And as soon as you post the job, there's 40 plus applicants, and it's like, oh, this is such a like pain in the ass to just
Right.
go through all this. And then you have a couple that like reach out in different ways, like LinkedIn and whatnot. It's like, oh, that's like I like that they went above and beyond and did that, but at the same time it's like, but I also want the most qualified person.
Totally.
Right? It's like, just because they did something extra, it's like, but are they the best out of everyone? Right?
Yeah. 100%.
So yeah, I think the creative stuff like works really well. Like the voice memo though, I've only gotten like 2. Like nobody has anything to sell me, right? Like, but like there's one guy that like connected with me. I guess he technically would have something to sell me. He's like a finance advisor or something for tech people, and he sent me a voice memo, and like you can't listen to a 30-second or 45-second memo and be like, I'm not going to respond to this, right? You're
100%.
like, you kind of want to send one back, but I'm like, I don't really want to send a voice memo.
Sure. Yeah. And again, it's just like, how do you stand out? And I think you bring up a good point. Even like if you're in sales or sales adjacent, it's way more common for you to want to be proactive. And if I'm proactive with a hiring manager and they're like, hey, that turned me off.
Yeah.
Well, if I'm selling for you, like probably I actually don't want to sell for you if that's how you feel about this outreach.
Yeah.
But then like, again, this season I'm looking for sales, but also probably more post sales, even like CSM roles. And I'm never going to cold call a CSM hiring manager because like that's not the world they live in. And I don't think that's actually speaking to them in a language that they're going to appreciate.
Yeah, you're probably right there. It is interesting because like, all the gurus, even like, myself, I would think that like that's actually pretty
Did you just call yourself a guru?
No, I'm not a guru. I'm saying the gurus, and then I said myself.
Nick Conley, guru.
No, definitely not. Definitely not. But like, even if someone was asking me like advice, like on, hey, how would you break into sales or whatnot? I'd be like, well, you should probably like do what you do in the job, like cold email them and then cold call them, right? But at the same time, it's like, it depends on like how many they're getting. Like if you're one of 2 people to cold call for that job, like that probably puts you at the top of the stack, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, then again, like if it's a marketing person,
Sure.
they probably, especially if it's like a VP of marketing or something, and they get a bunch of cold calls every single day, and then you're just another one like, hey, I applied to your job. I just wanted to.
But here's a hack, and I've used this one less, but I've got a buddy. He's looking for product, so totally different vertical. He's even getting more like detailed. He's making a custom video for each job that he applies to, like 2 or 3 minutes.
Yeah.
And then he sends that with his application because typically, they'll give you like, what's your personal website link? So he just drops in that link. Then he's hitting the hiring managers and saying, hey, here's my video. I just want to make sure you see it.
Yeah.
And he's at like, I think he told me like 55 or 60% success rate anytime he does a video for at least an interview. And you know him, but our buddy Nate, who's like crushing stuff on LinkedIn. Like one thing he said to me in the search was, you just want to start conversations.
Yeah.
And so I think trying to reframe of like, I'm not trying to send in an application that's going to land me the job right now.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to get the meeting. And if I get the meeting, can I go forward? And so I think that's even helped me kind of reframe as I go about it. And it's helped me like take it more seriously. So like really dial in, but also take it less seriously and be like, I'm going to try video. And if the video fails, like, that's okay. That's one account I'm prospecting into of, 25 to 30.
I mean, video is like, absolute game changer. The only, I would say, caveat with it is like, it's usually a 2 to 3 minute video.
Yeah.
For most people, that's actually going to take closer to like 30 minutes because you got to prep and like all this stuff, right? So like that should be for like your top like, 10 or 15, right? Because like, I mean, you've definitely done it. I've done it, right? You apply to a job on LinkedIn. You're like, even if I got this job, I don't know that I'd take it. But like, I kind of want to just throw my hat in there, like see if I can, get something.
But like, how many people do you know that have gotten the job from like that pitch? I know very few people, unless they're super, super qualified.
Yeah.
Who are like, I threw something in and now I got this sweet job. And so, again, my friend who's in the videos, I think his argument is much more like, I would rather apply to 3 to 5, knowing that I've got like really solid leads versus throw my hat constantly and have no idea where it's going to go.
Yeah. Well, and it's not annoying to people, right? Like what's annoying to me is, and this doesn't happen like that much. It happens maybe once every 2 weeks or something, but I get someone on LinkedIn that's like, they see that I'm at Amazon and they're like, hey, would love to pick your brain for 15 minutes next week about your time at Amazon. And like, you can see they're open to work and it's like, look, I get what you're doing. I don't disrespect it at all. Like, you're like, this is exactly kind of what you should be doing. But like, I don't really want to put a 15-minute call on the calendar so that you can like ask me about all these things at Amazon and then ask me for a referral afterwards, right?
Have you had anyone ask you straight up for a referral in that first call?
Uh,
Like say, hey, Nick, I want to get together. I want a referral.
no, because usually what I tell them, what I've been telling them the last like month is just like, hey, totally happy to do that. Before we jump on the call, though, I want to let you know that like our org is not hiring. I'm on my way out the door, so like
Yeah.
I'm probably the last person
Yeah.
that would be like a resource to you. So like if you still want to do it, then that's fine. But I just want to be like totally upfront with you.
Yeah.
And then yeah, maybe like there was one guy that we put time on the calendar, and then like a day before he canceled. So like, hey, I had an interview come up at the same time. I
Yeah.
think it was BS, but it's just like,
Yeah.
okay. But yeah, that's totally. I'm totally happy to do that, but I like don't want it to just be like, hey, I have to put on this,
Sure.
show and dance and whatnot just to ask you for a referral.
Yeah. So I mean, transparently, if we're multi-threading into the roles that we really want,
Yeah.
right? So we're trying to hit multiple people. I'm typically at least one of my asks.
Yeah.
I'm gonna say, especially if it's someone who's kind of would be a peer to me.
Yeah.
I'm saying like, hey, Nick, would love to get time with you. I've applied. I want to apply for this role.
Yep.
I would love a referral. I'm hoping that if our conversation goes well, you'd be willing to do it.
Yeah.
Because then it's like, okay, I'm not kind of bullshitting you before we get on the call. You know why we're getting on the call. And I mean, so many companies are going to give potentially there might be a referral bonus for
Well,
them.
that's what I was gonna say, and not to even mention like at Amazon, like I don't know, like when you refer at Amazon, you say like I know this person well, or like I barely know this person.
Yeah.
So like that definitely like probably plays in the algorithm where the application goes. But yeah, if they stay there for like 3 months, you get like a $2,000 bonus or
Yeah.
something, right? That's like most companies. So it's like employees are actually incentivized when you
For
reach out
sure.
to them.
Well, and this again, selling staffing software, I had no idea the amount of money that's spent for people to hire. Like, I mean,
A
you've
lot.
got it's insane.
Yeah.
And I mean, it makes sense because it's such a painful process, and so
Mhm.
there's so many pain points you can solve for. And I believe in it, like going through the process, selling it, understanding, like 100%. But 2.5 years ago, before I was ever there,
Yeah.
I could not have told you how many companies exist specifically to sit in that middle and help talent get into the seat. So why wouldn't Amazon pay $2,000 if they can skip all of that?
Yeah.
Like that's way cheaper than if they actually have to go through
Yeah.
any sort of outside agency.
Well, that's how I got in there. So
Yeah.
yeah, 100% it works. And yeah, the whole staffing agency or business is so interesting, right? Because like you think it's like such like a oh, we don't really need that. Like why would we go pay someone?
Yeah.
If this is $100,000 salary that you're going to pay the
Yeah.
person, it's 20 grand right off
Yeah.
the bat, right? To get someone, and then like senior people or executives, it's like 6 figures to go recruit those.
Yeah.
But those people also are searching for not just like putting up an application and like having 500 applicants to sort to, but they're like going out and trying to find people that are in roles and whatnot.
Oh,
right?
they're trying to find people in roles. They're also, I mean, okay, let's use the follow up as an example.
Yeah.
Let's say so, in 2 years when you've grown this thing and now you're worth, easy 7, maybe 8 figures, come on, why not?
Yeah, sure.
Like at that point, if you need a kick ass VA,
Yeah.
is it really worth your time to sit and post the job, interview first round, second
Yep.
round, third? Probably not. So at that point, if someone comes to you and says, hey, Nick, for $15K, I'm going to bring you pre-vetted candidates
Yep.
that I've talked to all of them. I'm going to run the whole process. I'm going to touch base with them through the interview process. And I'm going to help you when you get to negotiation. It's like, well, yeah. Why?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. Those services definitely exist, and for VAs, they're actually closer to like $3,000 or something.
yeah, for
And
sure.
and those ones do exceptionally well.
Yeah.
Like very well. There's this one Shepherd that's all over Twitter. A bunch of like the big Twitter guys are invested in it.
Yeah.
And I want to say they do like $5 million a year, and they launched like 2
Yeah.
years ago.
Yeah.
Which is crazy. The only thing with that type of business is it's not recurring, right? It can
Right.
be recurring. I mean, the idea is that like if you successfully, recruit for one person, they'll come back and hire more through you.
Yeah.
But there's some VA companies like that are like, yeah, you just pay us and then we pay them and we take a cut or something.
Right.
Which
Yeah.
is great for recurring, but it's like not as good for the business, right? And, like as a business person, you'd rather be like, just let me pay you $3,000 and then they're my employee,
Totally.
right?
Yeah.
But yeah, all that stuff it's pretty interesting. I had some stuff written down here. Yeah, I mean, like I wanted to talk about like how much different it is interviewing and just getting interviews than it was like 2 years ago.
Yeah.
right? because it like every other job I got was my first job was just through a normal application. Second one was through a normal application. And no, second one was actually a recruiter reached out to me, which is like in a normal job market, that's like, you get your inbox filled up, especially for certain positions like a BDR.
Yeah.
Like a BDR that's 1 year in is like perfect pickings for some other companies. So like,
Yes.
we don't have to train this person. They're still going to be an entry level. We basically get to, take this person, and there's usually BDRs with a lot of like pain points, right? Because they're like, I've been in this role for a year.
Yeah.
I'm not promoted yet like I should be, just like I was. I was
Yeah.
like, the bigger thing for me actually was like, okay, I'm probably going to get promoted in the next 6 months. But this other company just offered me more than I'd be making if I got promoted.
Yes.
And it's like, oh, that's hard to pass up,
Yeah.
right? Which there's a lot of that. But yeah, because you started at the Mom Project, a year and a half ago or 2 years ago?
Yeah, so it would have been April 2022, so a year and a half, a little over a year and a half ago.
Yeah. How'd you get that job?
Yeah, I mean, truthfully, got that job through an internal referral, but that was after 9 months of me. So I'd worked for a nonprofit for 10 years, and I knew going into my last year, they're like, hey, we're ready to transition, ready to love the nonprofit world. Anyone who works in it, like, man, it's so hard, but like you're under-resourced, you're probably underpaid.
Yeah.
And so, it can be hard sometimes for like to continue to grow your career. And so it got to a point where it's like, okay, I'm ready for something new. And two things, like at that point, I had no idea what I was doing. Like I was throwing, I talk about throwing your hat in the ring. Like I was throwing my hat in every ring, every type of job. I didn't even understand tech. So like if you would have told me like, hey, Ian, you can be a BDR or an AE, I might have been like, I'll be a BDR because it has 3 letters. So it's probably a better job. Like I knew nothing.
Yeah.
And so a lot of it was like learning. I remember I got one interview from an application for a learning and development manager role at like a pretty large org. And one, I don't know how I got through the ATS because I shouldn't have been on the interview. And two, we go through the interview, and the last question, obviously, she's like, hey, what's your salary range?
Yeah.
And I give a number that would have been 30,000 more than what I was currently making.
Yeah.
So I was like, this is a pretty good number.
Yeah.
And she says, okay. She goes, hey, Ian, I just want to let you know, like, I don't think we're going to move forward. Like, I don't think you have, enough concrete experience. She's like, and two, like, Ian, you make sure you're doing better research because like you're way undervaluing like what this role would pay.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh crap.
Yeah.
But it was like that was my first interview that
I wonder
I'd gotten.
do you think that played into it at all? Like, if this person like told us that, like he clearly doesn't like.
Oh, I'm sure. I mean, I had no business stepping in as a learning and development manager at that point in my career for like a large org.
I could have figured it out though.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I would have. But I think now being on the other side of it, I'm like,
oh, there's a lot more.
I mean, because this wasn't like a startup. This was 1,000+ people.
Yeah.
So like pretty significant, and they would have realized pretty quickly like,
this guy's never done this.
This guy's never done anything like again in nonprofit. Like yes, I had trained teams, I'd built programs, I'd done a ton, but not at the scale that they were doing. And so, anyways, I tell that story to be like, at that point, so much spray and pray, so much just like get job applications out, and it wasn't until I got serious about networking that I started to land offers. And so even when I was at the Mom Project or got that job, I got to say no to 2 BDR jobs because I got that AE offer.
Yeah.
But I'd done my research. I'd done classes. I'd upskilled. Got to a point where I knew what I was doing decently. And so to compare that job search to now, like, one, the market's so different. Like like we just said, I don't think hardly anyone. I didn't know work to get that interview that was unqualified for. Like I applied, nothing happened. I got asked to interview.
Yeah.
And now I'm like, I don't think that's happening. Period.
Yeah. I'd like, it's impossible to like find that stat, but it would be an interesting stat to see like how many people in 2023 are getting hired strictly off of like a LinkedIn application and nothing else.
Yeah.
Like probably very, very low.
I'm sure
single
that's
digits.
a poll you should run.
Yeah. Right. Well, but you'd have to find people that have taken a new job in 2023. Right.
Yeah. But
yeah. I mean, no, it's definitely possible. It's just, that would be interesting. Okay, well, sweet. Should we get into the sales news of the week?
Yes.
Let me check everything real quick. Let's get into the sales news of the week. So did you? I think you texted me on Tuesday after I put out the newsletter on Tuesday.
Yeah.
the learning versus performing. So that was like a really old study. I mean, it was 1998.
Yeah.
And they basically took all these medical sales reps and studied them. So they said they basically tested them to see if they were more learning oriented versus goals, or if they were more performance goal oriented, which basically means like learning is like, if I'm given a challenge, I'm basically like, okay, I want to learn how I can get better at this, so that at the end of this challenge, I'm going to be like better at sales. Even if I don't hit the goal, I don't care that much, but I just want to be like better at the end. Whereas goal oriented is more of like, I want to hit that number because I want people to like know that I'm good at sales and like I want to like make $1 million and things like that. And I don't think it's that shocking that like the learning oriented people outperformed the goal orient or the performance oriented by 60%. But I thought it was pretty interesting because like I actually don't know the stat on this, but I would say probably more people are performance goal oriented. What do you think?
Yeah, that's a great question. I have a super unique perspective because where I was at, I was one of 2 men on a team of 24.
Yep.
And I would say like the women on my team were all these incredible sellers with tons of experience, but I feel like the bulk of them would default more towards learning.
Yeah. Okay.
At least what I saw, and not that they didn't care. Like everyone cared about their numbers, but I felt like there's such a posture on that team about how do we like care for each other and how do we get better. So I mean, it doesn't shock me from where I've sat, but I could also I'd be interested to see like size of the organization, or even like if you segment it, like what's the enterprise versus mid-market versus SMB, like how do those 3 tiers break out?
Yeah, I think a lot of it too, like for example, my first BDR job, right? Like you show up in the office, there's a big screen that everyone looks at, and it's basically like a leaderboard of like, you know, who has the most opportunities that month, and like, you know, calls and emails and stuff for the day, right? Which, you know, everyone on the team can see. And if you put in an opportunity, like, so let's say you just got off the phone with someone, they're like, yeah, let's meet next week, right? You set up a demo for an AE. As soon as you put that in Salesforce, like the board lights up and it's like, Nick created a new opportunity.
Yes.
And, man, that like created so much animosity, like as it should, right? Because like you should be pretty competitive. But like, you know, there was people like that would have an off, like they'd like take the day off and then put in an opportunity and it would light up at the board and everyone's like, screw that person, you know, like, but people would put in like the most bogus ops just to like be at the top of the board, right? Like, I think it depends on your environment, right?
Sure.
Whereas medical sales, obviously you probably have a leaderboard, but you're spending a lot more time out in the field, right?
Yeah. Yeah, you're spending way more time in the field, and also I don't know this because I don't know that space, but I wonder how many deals are you trying to get done, right? Like, is that if I close 5 deals this year, I'm good, like, or I need 5, like I have literally no idea.
Yeah. Also, have you watched that new Hustlers Netflix movie? It's basically like about like the fentanyl crisis, like the basically like this sales rep started. She was like basically homeless. This guy found her, and this company was kind of failing. And they basically took like this fentanyl, this drug that had fentanyl in it that was meant for cancer patients. Like it's kind of, you know, morbid to say, but it was like, you know, cancer patients are usually on their way out with like stage 4, and this drug could like, you know, deeply suppress the pain, right? So it's like, we might as well let them like take this. Like it's not the best drug for them, but like, you know, they're already in a dire state. They basically like rebranded this to like, you know, this can help with migraines and stuff like that, right? And they got so many people addicted to fentanyl. They started paying out the doctors on the amount that they prescribed. So like these doctors would now prescribe it to like anyone, right? Like there was one guy that got arrested. It was like someone goes in there and they're like, what do you have? Okay, that mole on your face. Maybe like that could be cancerous, right? Like, let's do that, right? That's the scene that like ended up taking him down because he did that for an agent. But it was super interesting because it was like not only was it them selling one doctor, but it was like the amount of scripts that he wrote, and they incentivized him to write those. So yeah, to your point, I don't know. Maybe that was just in the movie because I don't know how. Like, and I'm sure every pill or whatever they sell is different. But I bet it's like, you know, signing up and then the amount the actual doctor uses.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, like it makes sense if you're selling medical devices, you have to be super curious about who you're selling to. So you have to understand what they need to connect it back to you. And And I don't think probably if you asked any of those top sellers who are learning driven, like they're not going to say we don't care about our results.
Yeah.
I think, but it doesn't shock me that they are more like, hey, I care about understanding this problem.
Yeah.
And if I do that well, like,
Yeah.
I'm going to sell.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, like another line from the movie was basically like, the best thing in the world is to sell is whatever I have in my bag that day, right? Like,
Yeah.
you have one drug to sell or
Yep.
one thing, and it's like you need to convince everyone that's the best thing in the world,
Yeah.
whether it is or not, right?
Yeah.
That's a little more ethical. um, okay, so that was the topic that I went over, but the actual sales stories I pulled out two. I don't know if you saw this one where it's basically, to give the synopsis, this sales rep basically took a commission only job. I guess this was back in like before it was during phone deregulation. So it's like I guess you couldn't have like monopolies in the phone industry, and he was selling some sort of like long distance product to different companies. And the firm that he was working for didn't actually like own the territory or anything.
Yeah.
They said they owned the contract, but it turned out like the guy that actually owned the contract just wasn't doing anything with it.
Yeah.
So they kind of like poached his territory. They weren't actually like selling the product. They were more of like one of those advertising sales agencies, right? Where like they just had people cold calling, getting the contracts. They'd then take a piece and give it to the bigger one.
Yeah.
This guy comes in. He's like, hey, I'm going to take this for 7 days, see what I can do with this, and like see if there's opportunity here. So he worked like 14-hour days. He racked up like $10K in commission the first week, turns in all his contracts. The people don't have the money to pay him on those, and they're like, oh, the signature is wrong on this, or you wrote the date wrong on this. And they figured out how to pay him like, $500 on those $10,000 contracts. Then a guy comes to him that's like the sales manager, takes him out to lunch and says like, hey, by the way, this is all like kind of a fraud, right? They're cheating you out of this commission. They don't actually have the contract for this. Let's go pitch the guy that actually owns the contract, start a company, and basically take over them. And they ended up going or basically selling way more than their competitor. Their competitor had, or their old company had to shut down, and then they sold their company to Sprint.
Yeah.
Great story, right?
Great story. I mean, I think those are always really fun stories. I think one thing I love about your newsletter is you're constantly highlighting these people who get super innovative and get super curious about something. And they're like, well, let's try it. Like, I mean, the CEO turned BDR that you highlighted previously, the fact that he's like, let me get creative about how can I do this well. And I mean, rack up just a crazy amount of money in a short term. And so, similarly love this because he's like, clearly he grinded, but he also like is producing results. Yeah,
well, and these stories don't get highlighted that much, and also like you could kind of make like a mini movie out of that story, right? Like it's not that like, because I don't think he had like a massive $100 million exit or something like that. Would be more along the lines of like a movie. But there's so many of these stories of like, it's not people like necessarily being like, how am I going to build the next like Facebook and like this master plan, but it's like, I started this commission sales job and then like kind of this opportunity knocked it. Like, I'm just picturing the movie scene of like, his manager Frank takes him out to lunch or whatnot. And he's like, I got a business proposition for you. It's like, I'm waiting for my moment to happen like that, right? Like someone take me out and be like, I have an idea how we can take over the entire East Coast with this one aluminum screw that we're going to change the way that, businesses do, something.
Knowing you, I feel like you're going to take yourself out to lunch. You're going to be like, I have this idea and I'm ready to execute on it.
Too nice of me. Thank you. Yeah, right. Okay. The next one is, this is an interesting one actually. It was just a post on Reddit and was basically, is creating urgency actually possible? Which I think is interesting in the world of sales because it is a tough one, right? It's like, if someone says they're going to be ready to buy probably around Q4 and it's Q1, is there really any way to like make them move faster? What do you think?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I really appreciated one of my managers at my last role. She's like a masterclass in sales, and she was always kind of asking like, why are we trying to create urgency here? Because her kind of posture was like, okay, if we were really going to care about what's best for the company long term, and me as a rep, if I'm being honest and have integrity with her, it's like if the deal's going to close Q4 versus Q2, Like, let's just close the deal was kind of more of her posture.
Yeah, yeah.
And so again, and not that she wasn't encouraging us at the end of every quarter to like get money across the line, because she definitely was, but especially so often I feel like urgency happens when we start discounting.
Yeah.
And that's where she was like, well, why are we giving up 10% of the deal just to get something through a week earlier?
Yeah.
So that's something that I think you really have to pay attention to. And some of it is like, I've got a buddy I've connected with who he sells cybersecurity software, and he's targeting like government and education, so SLED.
Yeah.
And like for him, urgency matters because their budget is there's so much bureaucracy to getting their budgets approved that he has to, if he can get something through this year, which gets him on the budget for this fiscal year, that actually makes it easier for them to then like budget line him in for next year.
Okay.
So that's just something where it's like, well, that's urgency because of the way their process works. Like
yeah.
But if it's like who I was selling to in my last role, their budget wasn't like as dependent kind of year to year. And so it was way harder for me to say like, let's get urgency here.
Yeah, it's a tough one because like one of the comments there, and I do like it, right? Like if you have your champion, right? This is like a big sale or whatnot, and you say like, okay, you say you want this implemented by Q1. In order to do that, we're going to need to close by December 15th because it's going to take at least 2 weeks of implementation and stuff. So let's work back from there, figure out who we need to get involved in this, and I think that works, but if it's Q1 and she says she wants it ready for Q1 of next year, I don't think it's like
totally.
It's a tough one to be like, well, let's just do this in Q2 instead, right? Like you mentioned, and then you start getting into, I mean, this is just like human psychology to be like, well, what if I gave you a 10% discount, right? Which I think the reason that it's like, hey, let's get this in before the quarter ends or whatnot is because, sales managers have quotas and accounting wants to see this on the balance sheet and cash flow and all this stuff, right? But I agree. Like if it's my business and someone says like, hey, we'll close this month if you give us a 10% discount. Well, actually, I'm going back on what I'm saying right now. I was going to say if someone said like, hey, we'll close this month if you give us a 10% discount. If not, you can wait and get the full thing next month. It's actually a tough one. It depends on like what financial situation you're in.
Oh,
right?
For sure. Depends on financial situation, and probably depends on like how certain are you. If you push, if you're like, no, we'll just close next month. Are you really going to close them next month? Or like, so I get it. Like, I'm not saying that you shouldn't try to push for it. I just think, I feel like I have seen people who start kind of throwing a ton into the offer to get something through earlier.
Anything they can. Right?
And it's like, at what point are you actually hurting yourself? And again, hurting the company.
Yeah, I agree. Discounts are weird. I was reading a thread on software discounts.
Yeah.
And basically like how software is just marked up by like 2,000%
Oh, it's
at
insane.
default, right? Because, and there's actually like consulting firms out there right now that'll go out and say like, okay, what did this business pay for this software, right? And what kind of discount did they get? And then what did this one get and whatnot, right?
Yeah.
So that when company A comes to the table and they say, hey, we want a discount on this and we want it knocked down to 2 years instead of 3 and we want this number of seats, they can be like, we know you did this for another company, right? You can do it for us. And it's just like bargaining power. And then as a sales rep, it's going to be like, well, okay.
Yeah, for sure. And I think
interesting stuff.
It's super interesting stuff. It's also probably, I mean, again, like I went through layoffs. So at some point where it's like, I don't have access to where our company's at. I don't even know if my manager did, but probably our VP, someone does, right? In the org, like someone has like full line of sight to all this stuff. And so at some point, like they are probably able to measure like, okay, yeah, we do want this deal through, even if we're losing 10%, because like cash in hand right now would be so vital. So yeah, it's just super tricky.
Cash flow is a big issue.
Yeah.
Right. With because you got people to pay and all that stuff. Yeah. Okay. So yesterday, I put out, and you've probably seen it, right? Like all over LinkedIn, this freaking outreach email, and every sales guru has their 2 cents about what it means. Basically, it's just like it's one of those like clickbait or whatever you want to call it that gets attention, right? It's like posting I don't know what's a good analogy right now, so I won't even try to say one. But yeah, so this email basically was sent to all outreach users, which is thousands of sales teams. The basic overview of this is Google and Yahoo are rolling out changes to their email security. These changes are going to start on February 1st, 2024 for Google. Yahoo hasn't actually really announced a date. They just said sometime in Q1. Basically, any organization that sends over 5,000 emails a day, which is like 90% of B2B companies, right? Like if you're over like 50, 100 employees, like your marketing team is probably alone sending out 1,000 emails a day, right? Any organization that sends out over 5,000 a day is going to be marked as a bulk sender, which isn't actually the worst thing in the world. It just means that they have to go through like extra what is it called? Authentication. And if they get marked at a 0.3% spam rate, which basically is like if someone sends you an email and you say this is spam, you just got marked as spam. This happens in the newsletter. It drives me absolutely crazy. It's like you signed up to my newsletter and then you're going to report it as spam, you freaking asshole. Anyway, if someone reports so for every 1,000 emails that you send, if 3 people report it as spam or as abuse, you're now marked at a 0.3% rate and basically put on like the Google's do not fly list.
Right.
Which means like you could send an email out to a Google user and they're going to be like, we're not delivering it.
Yeah.
That's the scariest part for me. But I think the bright side on this is like, this means that like you can't just put like an entry level sales rep into, outreach and be like, okay, figure out how to get customers. And they send out 5,000 a day.
Totally.
Right. So all that to say, I think that like mailboxes are not going to have as many spam emails. And we're going to have to get a little more creative. I think creativity is going to win. And also like, one-off messaging is going to win.
Yeah, for sure. I also think it'll be interesting because to your point, like it has to be marked as spam. And I wonder how many people mark it as spam versus just delete it.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's also on us as the consumer or as the, the second B in this B2B transaction to be like, I'm going to mark this as spam or I'm going to try to lock this up. Yeah. I'm actually really intrigued more from like the B2C. Like how does that play out? So if you think about, there's so many vendors, right, that you swipe your card, they've got the software, and then they capture your email. And then all of a sudden you start getting emails from a restaurant that you never wanted to get emails from. And I'm like, that stuff drives me nuts. And so typically you click on subscribe, but now I'm kind of like, no, that to me feels like the definition of spam.
Yeah, it's tough because like, is it spam because you technically signed up for their newsletter, right? It's like spam is like so up to the interpretation of like the viewer, right? Because it's like someone might be pissed off about the topic of my newsletter and be like, this feels like spam.
Sure.
Right? Like one time I reviewed like all the top orgs for RepView, like that won all like the top sales orgs or whatnot. And someone commented like, I hate this spam. And it's like, I was actually like trying to like, I think some people would have found this interesting, but you thought it was spam and maybe you marked my email as spam, right? I think this actually, to your point, lets more people know what like that spam does. It's almost like leaving a negative comment on like a restaurant's like page where it's like, oh, this person pissed me off, I'm in a bad mood, spam.
Yeah, for sure. No, I think you're totally right. And it'll be really interesting to even think about how do organizations handle this in terms of like, are they going to be able to pay? I would assume you might probably know more because you're in this world. Like, can you pay attention to what your spam percentage is? Like, does Google give you a report and say, Nick, you're at 0.1%? Or
I'm sure there's ways to find out, but when you send out an email campaign, you'll get back how many were reported as spam.
Okay.
So you can definitely see that. Like, if you sent out a campaign of like 5,000 emails, you'll see what landed in spam and also how many spam reports you got.
Okay. And we're saying 0.3% is the cutoff, right?
Yeah, which is kind of crazy. Like, 3 for every 1,000 you send out. Like, imagine a restaurant has 1,000 person email list and they send out, like you just mentioned, they send out 1,000 and 5 people marked that as spam.
Yeah.
It's like,
but
they're done.
Again, and I think that's where as the consumer, as the recipient and someone who sends emails for their job, it's like, the follow-up is a great example. Like, I signed up for the follow-up. I gave you my email address. If I don't want that, like, that's on me because I'm the one that opted in. And I think it's more of like when people scrape your email because you were on their website. So now they know you're a warm lead. Now they're going to pull your email. All of a sudden you're getting something. Like, that does feel like spam to me because it's like, so I can't visit a website and without you then marketing me. Like, and I understand why. Like, it makes sense. But again, like, if you're just And I would also say spam is like when it's mass.
Mm-hmm.
So if no one is probably scraping my email because I'm worth selling to. But if I was, like if it's personalized, that's not spam. Like that's actually outreach.
Yeah.
But it's when it's this mass market thing. It's like,
Yeah.
yeah,
That's tough. I mean, yeah, spam like is totally up to the interpreter, like how they feel that day, like what their like the newsletters like piss me off. But like I said it on Twitter one time, I was like, there's a special place in in hell for people that report my newsletter after they subscribe to it. But someone commented back and they're like, I don't owe you anything. I signed up for it. I didn't like it. I'll report it as spam if I want to. And I'm like,
yeah, but
it's like they hold something over you now, right? It's like, I want something like spam.
Yeah. I don't know if you want to talk about this right now, but like how often are you cleaning up your list?
Pretty often, which hurts, right? Because it's like, oh, there goes 100 people,
right?
But a decent amount. But you have to think like the people that aren't opening. It's not the people that like cleaning your list gets rid of the people that aren't opening and aren't clicking or anything like that. But the people that report it as spam are the people that open it and then report it as spam.
Yeah.
So it's like it's hard to get rid of those, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, that'll be interesting. There are ways around it, right? Like, the way that I run it for some clients is like, you set up multiple inboxes and no more. So emails aren't sending more than 30 a day. There's always going to be a way around it. Like that's what you kind of realize. Like, everyone's like, oh, this is the end of whatever. Like this is the end of Facebook ads or this is the end of drop shipping. There's always a way to innovate and always do something.
I don't know if you've seen, but like, there's been all these posts like this is the end of BDRs, SDRs, even before this news. Yeah. And then I'll see that, and then right below it, someone was like, "Hey, I'm hiring 3 SDRs." Mm-hmm. So it's like, well, this is just your perspective.
It's more like clickbaity. Yeah. It's like, oh, here's a polarizing opinion, and now I'm going to get a lot of clicks, and people are either going to love it or they're going to hate it.
Yeah.
I don't think that there's going to be an end to anything like that. Like you'll probably be able to automate more things. So like, when you used to need 10 SDRs, now you can do, 5 SDRs.
Sure.
But I mean, maybe this is like a different direction, right? It's like, hey, we actually need SDRs, like writing personalized emails.
Writing personalized emails. I mean, I think phone calls are going to continue to be something that people are paying attention to, even though, I mean, I don't know very many people who raise their hand and say, I love cold calling.
Yeah.
But like that is for sure, especially if done well, done with good follow-up, like such an effective tool.
Yeah. And man, I've realized like there is such a delta in a good cold caller versus a bad cold caller.
Yes.
Right. I, hiring this VA to do cold calls in, she lives in the Philippines, but she's calling offices here in the U.S. And, as soon as we're paying her, dollars an hour, right? So it's like, you can't expect to have like a world-class salesperson, but it's like, she'll call someone and be like, hey, do you guys, I noticed you guys aren't offering this. Is this something you'd be interested in? They're like, no, probably not. She's like, okay, thank you. Goodbye. And it's like, like you have to be like, oh, why not? Like, or, hey, can you send me over some information? Like, okay, yeah, thanks. I will. Bye. But it's like, no, you need to be like, happy to send that over. Like, what would you like me to send? And try to push for a call. So there's those, there's just a big delta between like a good cold caller and a bad one.
No, 100%.
Executive coach at Google, executive sales coach lead at Google shares the top 4 habits he sees in the most successful leaders. They're decisive and expert communicators. They're constantly working on self-improvement. They're expert relationship builders, and they have balanced temperaments and think long-term. What do you think about that?
Yeah.
I mean, that's just like they do all the right things.
They do all the right things. Do you know people who sell for Google?
I don't think so. I'm not sure.
I think so. I know a few people at Amazon. You're probably who I know the best at Amazon. Mm-hmm. Something that it's been fun for me to get to know about you at Amazon. I think you're really good at what you do, but you also like you don't walk on air, like if that makes sense. And so sometimes I think we get this. I think we look at some of these like top tier institutions and we're like, man, you must be Ivy League bread and butter to be in there. And sometimes like they are, but sometimes you get lucky.
Yeah.
And sometimes you're like, you just have those 4 characteristics. So like, that doesn't shock me. I also think most orgs, if you said show me your best salespeople, could check all those boxes.
Yeah, I mean, like when I first joined the team there, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm like working among the smartest people in the world.
Uh-huh.
And I think certain teams, like if you're working on an AI team there, like you
Yo.
100% are.
Yes.
But like I was like, oh wow, these people are like way smarter than any other job I've worked at, right?
Sure.
And then like you're there for a year and you're like, huh, how do some of these people get on the team, right?
Yeah.
I mean, overall, there's a very high bar for hiring. Like getting hired is very hard, but it's not impossible.
Yeah.
I interviewed at Google actually, and they ask you like all these situational questions, and like you almost like get in your head because you're not trying to answer it how you'd normally answer it. You're trying to answer it in the way that Google wants it answered, right? So that was always like it's like how would you go about this, and it's like you have to use their framework, and it's like, but like would I really think like this? Probably not. Okay, the last one we have here is what is the cringiest thing you've ever seen in sales? Any good stories?
I'm trying to think.
There was a good example here. This rep said in my forward message, I say, so basically he was like working this deal. They were going back and forth on it. The prospect or the customer sent him an email. He forwarded it to the rest of the team, and in his message to the rest of the team, he basically said, like, I don't know why these clowns are giving us a hard time. Like, everything's in writing. They're such losers. Ended up sending it to the customer and his whole team. And then, like, his director of customer success wrote out and said, like, good morning. You sent that email to the clients. And it's like, that's when you just want to, like, shrivel up.
Oh, my goodness. Like, Yeah. I mean, this isn't my story. This is a friend of mine, but she got hired she's basically cold calling for a company that, I don't need to get into what they were selling, but she was cold calling for a company, and they just gave her tons of lists, but nothing. They gave her, they gave her no help, no tools. They were just like in the list. I saw the list were like somewhere in Excel, somewhere in just Word, somewhere in Google Sheets. Like it was a mess.
Yep.
And then they fired her 4 days later because she didn't have any leads done for them yet. Like she had no meeting set. And she's like, hey, I'm working part-time.
Yeah.
I've worked 12 hours. Here's everything I've cleaned up for you.
Yeah.
Here's numbers I've started verifying. Here's emails. And I guess, I don't know if cringy is the right word, but like certainly like shitty, like in terms of just, I think a lack of awareness of how sales in 2023 works.
Yeah.
And someone who is super qualified, who's actually trying to help them. And instead they're just like, well, you've had numbers now for 4 days and you don't have meetings set, so you're done.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, that's tough. I've done some cringy things. Like definitely like cold calls that I can't even think of. Like, you know, when you're like making a cold call sometimes and you like forget about who you're calling or like why you're even calling. And it's like, what do I even sell? Like, dude, I've definitely just like blanked and been like, why am I even calling?
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Or you think like it's rang 4 times, so you're like, all right, I'm getting ready for voicemail.
Yeah.
So you got your voicemail prepped, and then they pick up. And you're like, oh crap! Like here we go. I thought
you're like, I wasn't prepared for this.
You're like, I already had the email drafted saying sorry I missed you. So
yeah, that's the worst when you're making it and you just kind of like I space out. I forget who I'm calling. I forget the person's first name. Like, hey, can I please speak to David?
Yes. Oh man.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. No, just the worst.
It is. All right. Well, that's all that I have. Anything you wanna talk about?
I mean, maybe this is appropriate because we're nearing Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
And follow-up has been live. How long?
Probably like 8 months.
8 months. What's something, the classic Thanksgiving question, you all go around like, what's something you're thankful for about the follow-up?
Yeah. I'm thankful that it like let's see here. I'm thankful that it's gotten to where it's at because like in the beginning, I mean, even still, it's like, oh, I don't have anything to write about. Like, crap. Like, how am I going to do this? And I'm thankful that like I've always been able to. No, this is such a bad answer. What I'm really thankful for, I'll tell what the real answer is. That I'm thankful for that. Like advertisers are finally starting to show interest, right?
Yeah.
Like HubSpot has been awesome because early on, even when like I'm a small list, and like you think of like these massive companies like HubSpot, and you're like, why would they care about my 10,000 person
Sure.
email list, right? It's like they could probably create that in like a day or something.
Yeah, yeah.
But like when you actually like put out good content, like that's actually more important than the size of your list sometimes, right?
Yeah.
Because like if people are actually reading it, that's way harder to do than it is to go collect 10,000 emails, right? So yeah, I'm thankful that it's gotten to where it is. I'm thankful for people like you that have been, supporting it the whole time.
Yeah.
Because yeah, I mean, even like my family, like close friends and whatnot. This is how it usually always works. It's like, hey, like subscribe to my email, and they're like, yeah, sure, like you can put my email in there or whatnot.
Yeah.
And then usually it's like, oh, I'll probably never open the email. But I've had like a few people, I think you included, like, oh, that was actually like really, like I actually like your content. Like,
Yeah.
let's go. Which like, yeah, because like friends, when friends start businesses and stuff, it's like, hey, I want to be as supportive as possible. But
Sure.
like, if I don't really jive with it, it's like,
Yeah.
how much do you want me to?
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, that's good.
Yeah. What are you thankful for?
Yeah,
in life right now.
Well, I'm gonna piggyback because I actually have something about the follow up that I'm really thankful for.
Okay.
So, you know this. I'm just saying this for anyone who's listening. Because we were friends before you started the follow up, and because my wife knows you,
Mm-hmm.
and she got on the follow up because she's like, I want to
Yeah,
help. I want to help Nick. My wife is not in tech at all. She's
Yeah.
great, but she's not in tech. But what I'm thankful for about the follow up is probably like every 2 weeks she'll see me engage with something on LinkedIn or you post something on LinkedIn, and then she'll ask me about it. And she's like,
Yeah.
hey, what's going on with this? So for
Yeah.
instance, the Google and Yahoo mail story.
Yeah.
Last night we're having dinner and she's like, hey, what's up with that? Like, what's going on? And she has no context, but it's
Yeah.
like it's entered her world. And I think that's been really fun because like we get to have some conversations about tech
Yeah.
that I'm fully aware of because I'm living and working in it. But
Yep.
she's in the mental health space. Like this is not her world at all.
Yep.
But for her to get to kind of see like peeks in and then to
Yeah.
come in and have conversations has just been really fun and something
Wow.
I didn't expect.
Yeah. Yeah. That's cool. Yeah. That's funny because, like, yeah, the Google and Yahoo stuff have nothing to do with her world, right?
Right.
I guess she opened it up, though.
Yeah.
Thank you. Shout out Colleen.
Shout out Colleen.
That's awesome. I appreciate it, man. Well, yeah, we can wrap this up, and I appreciate you coming over.
Yeah, man. Thanks.
All right.
The first episode.